everyone. I am Dr. Lubna Somjee. I am an executive coach and psychologist and founded my business in 2005. And today I've been asked to moderate the panel. So thank you so much for tuning in to episode 6 of the LIFT Hudson Valley Remote Roundtable from Hudson Valley Pattern for Progress. A new episode of this remote roundtable is available monthly, featuring conversations surrounding professional development and leadership, communication, and connection. And today we're going to be discussing a topic that I'm pretty excited about. And I appreciated that Pattern was also excited about it. It's something that comes up quite a bit in my executive coaching work. And it's this idea of leadership moving forward. Perspectives will be discussed today on how leadership really does need to be different moving forward in terms of how we think and how we work, how we collaborate, and how we prioritize diversity and inclusion. Currently, so much is in flux as a result of recent events. So in part, I'm obviously talking about COVID and its impact, its continuing impact, as well as the uncertainty that we're all facing of how long we'll continue to deal with this virus. But I'm also talking about how some leaders, some organizations, some institutions have been pivoting to respond in solidarity with Black people as well as other people of color. So, clearly with everything that's happening, the goal for leaders cannot be to simply return to business as usual. And when I think about leadership moving forward, it's within this frame of, be local, think global, meaning think big. It's important right now to reimagine leadership. It's important for us to be reimagining our businesses and our organizations. It's important right now to be expansive in our thinking and to constantly be iterating. So, to that end, we have 3 really amazing panelists with me today, and they will be exploring and discussing ideas about how to evolve leadership so that we're actually moving forward as opposed to reverting back to the status quo. Joining me today are Apryl Gozza, who is the Executive Director for the Eleanor Roosevelt Center at Val-Kill. Also joining us is Freddimir Garcia, Regional Director for Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement, Westchester Medical Center Health Network, HealthAlliance Hospital, and also Diego Aviles. He is the Vice President, Fund Development, Northeast Region for the United Negro College Fund. Thank you all for joining us here today. Before we dive in, if I could have each of you just share a little bit about your professional background, perhaps about your organizations, that would be great. Diego, maybe we start with you.
Sure. Thank you so much, Lubna, and thank you for this opportunity to be here this morning and reconnect and kind of be back home in the Hudson Valley. I'm working about 20 years in the non-for-profit space in development work, and had the opportunity to work as the director of the Hudson Valley Boy Scouts, where I ended up becoming connected with Pattern and really understand the work that they do. Jonathan Drapkin, close, great friend, and had the opportunity to be a fellow in my first year, I guess the inaugural class of the fellows program. So it is a critical organization, so kudos to the work that they continue doing. As a fundraising executive, I transitioned to the YMCA, and then most recently, for the last 2 years, I've served as the vice president for UNCF. And our mission is pretty simple. We were created to support our historically Black colleges. We have 37 in our network. We support their students. And at the end of the day, we're helping to advance educational opportunities for young people of color. We want to make sure that any young person has the opportunity to get to and through college and be able to have that game changer to basically create the systemic change that is needed in our world.
Thank you so much, Diego, and thanks for joining us today. Freddy, how about you? Share a little bit about your professional background, if you would.
Sure. Lubna, thanks for the introduction. Pattern, thank you for having me. Funny enough, I too am a recent graduate of the Fellows Program this couple of weeks ago. So I think we have a few folks who've gone through it. But as a regional director for diversity, inclusion, and community engagement for WMC Health Alliance, my role is kind of twofold. So one is on the diversity and inclusion side, working with our employees to make sure that obviously that they're up to date with kind of the changing and evolving world of diversity and inclusion, allowing our employees to be engaged with each other and with the organization, and kind of developing kind of the culture around that. And then from the community engagement side, working with a lot of our local communities, specifically in Ulster County, Dutchess County as well, Hudson Valley. So kind of connecting. How does the hospital, as a one of the already largest employer in Ulster County, how do we engage with our communities? How do we try to eliminate health disparities? How do we assure that we are here to partner and work with the people of this community? So just trying to be naturally involved as much as I can in a genuine, effective way as much as possible. Before this role, I worked at Marist College in Dutchess County for a number of years. I also attended there, got 2 degrees from Marist, and been part of the Hudson Valley for the last, 12 years or so. So yeah, really looking forward to the conversation, and hopefully I can bring something to the table.
Thank you, Freddie, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And Apryl, how about you? Let's hear a little bit about your professional background, your organization.
I am Apryl Gozza, the Executive Director of the Eleanor Roosevelt Center at Val-Kill, and I am so thankful to be able to share this space with you this morning, Lubna, and my colleagues. And it's so great to be reconnected with Pattern. I am a Fellows Program alum, 2011, and I certainly attribute where I am today in part by participating in the wonderful Fellows Program. So if you've not yet participated in the program and you are an emerging leader, I very highly recommend it. Next month will be my 20th year in the ever-rewarding field of nonprofit. What started out for me as an interest in education at a young age took on a new life and evolved into my life's work devoted to the betterment of community through the nonprofit sector. And so I've had an interesting career journey. It's resembled more of a jungle gym rather than a ladder. And my career has offered me opportunities to lead organizational startups with less than $75,000 budgets to organizations with $55 million budgets. And I will say not one more challenging than the other, but certainly each has come with its own tremendous rewards. But one thing that I was always sure of is that I wanted to develop people and build communities. And my role at the Eleanor Roosevelt Center couldn't be more apropos for what I envision for me and for the trajectory in this leadership journey. And so our mission of building socially conscious and responsible leaders really resonates with me. And I often tell people that I have the best job in the world.
So Freddie, let's start with you. I think, I hope COVID has sort of helped us all to see how much every single one of us relies on each other to sort of live well, and the critical importance of community. And so from a community engagement perspective, I'm curious to hear from you sort of what changes. How do we continue to create new, genuine relationships? How do we continue to, productive collaborative efforts within our communities?
Sure. I mean, I think, community engagement, it's part of this kind of notion of networking, right? And I think how we network really doesn't change. What changes is how we engage to network. So, taking my own example, part of what I do when I network is I think about how can I be helpful? What can I learn? Who else can I connect with within this relationship? And how do we grow together from this point on? So as I think about those kind of 4 questions, I kind of always keep that in mind. But what changes is, how do we meet? So I think the Zoom and the go-to meetings, I think that obviously has ticked up. I try to, in all my conversations and discussions, I try to be myself and be comfortable and try to be lax as much as possible. So I try to take meetings in different locations, right? So I try not to just sit in the office. Maybe I'll take a call outside. Maybe I'll go for a walk, put my headphones on. Because I think, again, as people, we want to engage in those genuine and real interactions. Part of that as well is, the way we think about scheduling meetings and engaging changes too, in the sense that I think, one, we have to be a little more patient. In the sense, everyone's email is inundated. People are sitting in front of a computer at all times. So I think, as much as we want quicker responses, I think, everyone's looking for quicker responses. So there's a lot of time to be had there. And then, lastly, I'm not a big phone person. I really don't like to talk over the phone as much. I'm more of a kind of person-to-person interaction, but I think part of the work is also kind of going old school and picking up the phone and calling people and connecting in that way as well. We at HealthAlliance just want to make sure, obviously, that we're present, that we're seen, and that people know that we're here when they need us. So that's really the goal of the work. And I think whether it's you're looking for advice, whether you're looking for a business relationship, I think those things pretty much stand true through and through.
Thank you so much. Diego, just to kind of piggyback off of Freddie's question, any changes with how the UNCF has been collaborating, with communities differently since COVID, since all this, uptick of violence?
Well, right now, today, we were pleased to announce that Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix, was on CBS and is making a $120 million contribution to UNCF and to Morehouse and Spelman. So very exciting date indeed. And we are right now, we've been around for 76 years. We've been in this business for diversity and inclusion for a long time. And I think there's 3 areas, as Malcolm Gladwell will say, that creates a movement. And it's probably very timely right now, is we always had the right message. And we've always had some great messengers. And at this point, the context is there. The third component for a movement is there. And the world is watching. And we want, as companies start saying, now we want to make a difference. But we want them to make sure that they understand it's not just about a photo op. It's not just about today. There were companies and individuals that worked with us since 1944. There were companies that worked with yesterday. We want them also there tomorrow. This is not going to happen overnight. And if we are able to be, and we have been and continue to be, a vehicle to create the systemic change necessary, the ripples of hope to bring about better futures for all, that's at the end of the day what we're trying to do.
No, I think that's great, Diego. First of all, congratulations for those donations. That's huge, right? And I think what you're saying is spot on. I mean, I think it's important for companies to be in solidarity and not be performative, and to really think about the long road when it comes to diversity and inclusion in all sorts of ways. And it sounds like your organization is really trying to do that. I'm curious, just to keep going with this, we know from science that, diversity helps businesses in so many ways. And we also see the critical, or I should say detrimental impact of not paying attention to diversity and inclusion, and how that ultimately impacts all of us. And yet there are still so many out there who really don't quite understand why diversity is important. So Diego, I'm going to ask you, why is diversity more important now than ever?
Sure, and I think you, Lubna, you touched on, kind of the first angle where there have been a lot of reports, and from McKinsey and a variety of reports that, as even before this all happened, that companies were moving towards, D&I is an important opportunity and space for. It was a business imperative. So companies have realized that, at the end of the day, to get diversity of thought, you got to have diversity of background and where people come from. And we're trying to create that space for people to foster innovation and everything. Post-COVID-19 and the way the world is, of course, it's, it was always important, and it's more important than ever, is because at the end of the day, if you have people that look just like you, whether it's the same sex, the same gender, the same, color, you're not going to make the best decision, whether you're a government, a company, organization, that is suited for everyone. It's only when you have people that look not like you around the table. And sometimes I think, companies or organizations, and I'm just saying generally, may have had a hard time because they want to make a quick decision. And sometimes that relies on, unfortunately, sometimes groupthink. You have the power dynamics of, the leader at the top who is paying everybody, making sure that they have bonuses. And they say, well, here's a great decision that we want to do. Go out to market, this, whatever the decision is. And rarely do, if you don't have people around the table that will question that and say, hey, did you think about it this way? The best decision is not always made. So post-COVID-19, this current time and point in time in our nation, I would urge every company to look at and say, does everyone look like me? What is our leadership structure? What is the opportunities for growth, the pipeline development? And at the end of the day, that's why diversity is so vitally important and an imperative right now, I think, for every organization, company, and government.
Agreed. Thank you. Freddie, given the range of experiences that you've had, between your experiences in academia and healthcare, your exposure to different types of organizations, given your board work, I'm curious to hear your perspective. I mean, how do you feel diversity and inclusion sort of fits into this new world, into this new context?
Right. And to kind of add to Diego's, I think, part of it, COVID has kind of left a gap in all our lives. I think it's a struggle that we're all dealing with. Whether it's you've lost someone, you've lost your job, you are trying to figure out where do you fit in this new structure, et cetera. And with that, I think we got to think about our employees' well-being and engagement. And anytime, I think any conversation about employees, well-being and engagement, constitutes a discussion about diversity and inclusion. I mean, we're all different. We all come from different paths, different walks of life. We look different. We think different. And I think, as much as we want to support our employees, I think we have to start thinking about, that difference in how and of who we are. There's not one cookie cutter solution to all this. Not everyone is looking for the same things. Whether it's, physical health, mental health, go down the gamut. So I think that diversity and inclusion at this moment with COVID should and most certainly be at the front and center of all our employee discussions. What COVID has taught me, during these last couple of months is that, as humans, we're at our very best when we engage, communicate, interact with each other, which is something that we were all kind of looking for. And diversity and inclusion is the ingredient to that, right? And allowing us to explore, each other's thoughts and ideas and be able to kind of challenge each other in a positive way. So I think, again, diversity and inclusion at the center of all employee discussions as we bring people back who were furloughed, as we think about, the struggles that people are having. How do we close the gap? How do we make people feel part of this organization? I think those are at least the conversations that we're having on a day-to-day basis.
I agree. And I like your point about it being at the center as opposed to it being peripheral or something we'll get to as an afterthought, sort of woven into the strategic plan.
Absolutely. And to add to that too, I think there's, with a lot of our systems, engagement being one of them, right? We kind of have to hit a reset button, right? It's a great opportunity to explore these new things, to start from the beginning, to build from the ground up. So as much as, it might, diversity and inclusion to some organizations, to some companies might have been a little challenging, maybe not understand it, maybe, the time didn't allow, whatever it is that it might have been for you. I think this is a perfect time to say, okay, how do I begin kind of integrating? Where do I have the conversations? Who can I bring to help have those conversations? I think all those things are important.
I think Freddie is right on. He touched upon all the right tactics regarding D&I and belonging, and it really touches upon, as Hudson Valley leaders are looking for a quick little saying, and it's been around, and it's, diversity is making sure that everyone's invited to the dance, including is actually going out and making sure that they're dancing. There's no, making sure that everyone's dancing, and the belonging is that allowing a safe space for people to be able to dance like nobody's watching. And that's what I think Freddie was really touching upon in just the succinct ways. And thank you, Freddie.
Absolutely. I think before we move on from this and explore some other issues, I'm curious to hear from anyone on the panel. What are ways organizations in the Hudson Valley can have more diversity and inclusion within their organizations? What are some concrete things they should be maybe thinking about moving forward?
It's a conversation. I serve on a few boards, very involved in the community, and those are conversations I have with people on a regular basis. I think, there are different levels of action that an organization can take. I think there are the training, the facilitation, the discussion piece that can definitely make a difference as long as it's on an ongoing basis. But I think in today's climate, with everything that's going on, I think it's important to take real action. And by that, I mean, how do we build pipelines to make sure that Black and brown people, for example, are highlighted in all our levels of our organization, right? From board all the way down to service positions. How do we make sure that, it's not only when things happen that we're having these discussions? How do we assure that communities aren't left out when we are, giving out some scholarships or talking about the future of the Hudson Valley? So making sure that those voices are kind of part of the overall strategy and strategic plan of the organization. I think that's, a substantial way to make sure that it doesn't get left behind.
That's great. Thank you so much. Apryl, I wanted to ask you, COVID has put such a glaring spotlight on our reality in so many sectors and highlighting things that were truly not working. Given all that you see based on the reach of the work that you do and all the organizations you come into contact with, both nationally and internationally, I'm curious, is there a way you think we should be starting to reimagine our collective futures, where our behaviors will allow us to sort of thrive, but also allow us to live in more balance than we had been? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I have worked in human services pretty much my entire career. And, those of us with mission-driven souls, we work in an indefinite state of reimagining a future where our behaviors allow us to thrive. And, with all of the good work that, you and my fellow colleagues that are here with us today have put in over the years, never did I ever imagine that it would take a global pandemic or an economic crisis to really see how our futures can be reimagined. And so, COVID came in, it swept up the world like a tsunami. And, here we are at a pivotal moment, really writing history. But what I have to say is I think that the sad and unfortunate truth about COVID, despite its many sad and horrible implications in terms of sickness and death, it really has galvanized us to draw closer as one global community. How can we see more clearly what we're capable of achieving as a collective? And I think that we need to really bring into focus what needs to be done to secure our future, not only in business, but really our future on this planet. And so, the economic cycle has been broken, or at least it's been disrupted for a while. Our usual way of being has changed irreversibly, if not forever, despite delusions of getting back to normal. Mm-hmm. And I think, normal no longer exists. And how do, we have to find ways to really shed the old and don the new. And, the question is how will we as a society embrace this new normal? And so, coming up, through the ranks early in my career, I had a mentor who once said to me that crisis and opportunity are the same word in Japanese. And anybody that knows me well knows that I say it often. And I think that this crisis, for better or for worse, is really a new opportunity for us, and one that I think that we need to embrace. It has allowed us to reconnect with our families in ways that we hadn't previously. It's provided revived appreciation for the outdoors, for life's simple pleasures. I think about, and Freddie might be able to speak to some of this. I mean, it's created efficiencies in all types of sectors, particularly in healthcare. It's enforced social isolation has really accelerated the virtual working environment. And so with that environment, that space saves us money. There's just so many things about our behaviors and how they have changed and will continue to change that I think will be really advantageous to us sort of reimagining our new world.
It sounds like, there are a lot of leaders out there who are really trying to quickly get back to baseline, get back to normal. And it sounds like what you're saying is, I don't think that it is useful to get back to normal. I think we need to really be thinking about innovative ways to approach how we do the work and why we do the work and, what it looks like. I think that's correct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a new agenda for change is emerging, and, we need to gain traction. And there are going to be other questions raised that just aren't going to go away. And, there are companies, as we know, that are close to collapse. Their business models have revealed unsustainable, models that are outdated, single service activity that has been exposed, it's been disrupted. We're in a place of disruption. And I think that we need to build on our collective experience, really as communities, as we come together and really create some fertile ground for, some commerce-led sustainable innovation. And we need to really be transforming what our business models look like. Or else I do believe that, people are going to be left behind. No matter what sector you're in, you're going to be left behind. And so this is, it's in our face. We have a unique opportunity where we can join up the dots. We can, leaders are seeing the bigger picture just rapidly forming. It's right in front of us. And I think that we really need to, grab hold. I think it's not a time for resistance. And I think we need to go with it.
Agreed. Thank you. Diego, similar to Apryl, given the work that you do, you have exposure to all sorts of national and international organizations. I mentioned before that, one can be local, but that it's important to think global or think big. I'm curious, Diego, based on what you see and given the current landscape that is 2020, sure. What advice would you give local leaders on how to improve their craft, how to improve their leadership skills?
Sure. No, absolutely. Thank you, Lubna. One of the things, and I've been having a lot of conversations with friends and obviously with colleagues and a variety of different individuals regarding the current situation. And I think this might be a good thing for Hudson Valley leaders is, and my learnings in the last 2 years at UNCF. And at the end of the day, the way we grow up, our upbringing, our experiences, everything that becomes us is our world map. It's the way that we see the world through. And it's a lens, obviously. It's our world map, it's our lens. And at the end of the day, every world map is there to protect us, to make sure, it could be as simple as don't touch the stove. Don't go outside when your mother at age 3 says, don't do that, and you get hit. It's things like that. But what happens is, unfortunately, sometimes as we get older, we keep true to that world map because it's been there to protect us during our earlier years. And as we get older, we reinforce ourselves with the news feeds that we read, with the friends that we keep, the experiences that we choose to keep, all that reinforces that world map, because kind of what Apryl was saying is, God forbid, it gets disrupted. We don't want that world map to be disrupted. So my advice would be to Hudson Valley leaders is to really get a feel of what your world map is, who you are, and then get out of your comfort level. Go out and read other news feeds. Read other channels. Choose other experiences that will not be limited to what you are. And what they say is, and for me and UNCF for the last 2 years has been incredible. They say you don't know what you don't know. And I guarantee you, if Hudson Valley leaders spend a little bit of time in that I don't know space, it'll be like the road less traveled. It will make the difference in the world. And the last one is, which I like, is the Navy SEALs always say, the big one about when you get comfortable with the uncomfortable, that's where growth happens. So
I agree. I think that's a good point. I mean, I like that analogy of the world map quite a bit. And I think part of what you're saying there is it's really important to get outside the bubble, right? I mean, I think it's really hard to do, because I think a lot of leaders, at least that I work with, feel like they do get outside their bubble. But in fact, when they're trying to make major decisions, they're talking to the same trusted people that they've talked to for the past, 5-10 years. And I always recommend get outside your bubble, really talk with people in your industry or adjacent to your industry, throughout the area you live in, throughout the state, throughout the nation. And we have the capacity to go global and learn from other countries, other leaders, how to do what we do better, which of course, when you do that, there's more opportunity for ideation and iteration. Apryl, I mean, I think moving forward, we need to be much more expansive in our thinking. Organizations are going to require certain critical leadership traits in order to be able to sort of restore, flailing supply chains and product lines, and even to restore entire industries. What do you feel are some of the core leadership traits that will be most critical in a post-COVID workplace, and why?
Yeah. So, Lubna, COVID has been an unnerving test of leadership. Indeed, it's just. I think we're all feeling it. But I think as leaders, we just have this tremendous weight that is sitting on our shoulders as we navigate unique and unprecedented pressures. I feel as a leader, it was all of a sudden one day in March that, we just hit a brick wall. And then all of a sudden, leadership as we knew it, sort of to Diego's point, leadership as we knew it, it sort of blew it apart. And I was like, okay, well, we got comfortable in our space. We knew what we were doing. And then we quickly experienced the pain of, figuring out how to secure supplies, or, setting up office at home and keeping fearful employees motivated to work. And, we had all these unprecedented pressures. Organizations like mine at the Eleanor Roosevelt Center, some organizations have had to let go of, bold strategic plans that have been years in the making, or, some leaders may have had to, try to keep their strategic plans from falling apart. And I think that when we think of leadership, when we think of planning, I'm yet to speak to a colleague who has gone to the shelf and dusted off the pandemic playbook and, sprung into action. It just doesn't happen that way. And, in this place, I don't care who you are, how many, years of experience you have as a leader, there is no playbook or rule book on how to deal with, the impact that COVID is having on business. We are all in uncharted waters, where there are strategies and best practices that don't even exist yet. And so, if it has taught us anything, it certainly is that leadership matters, but it's a different type of leadership. And so, from my perspective, and to answer the question, central to leading, I think in the face of COVID is a few things. One, I think that, again, when Diego talked about, life experience brings, really an authenticity to who you are. And I think that authenticity is key. It's not something that's sort of pie in the sky. And if you're looking for, whether you're a leader, manager, whatever that looks like in the workplace, I really think that there's a level of authenticity that needs to come here, and certainly humility. Look, at the most fundamental level, the key to survivability, which formerly was sustainability, will be environments that foster transparency, that inspire trust and loyalty across all stakeholder groups. And as human beings, we rely on relationships and relatability, and people need to know that, you are also human. And, people know why you occupy the seat that you do. We were all hired to run the business, but people also need to know that we're human beings first. And, admittedly, we don't have all the answers, and we're all in the same boat. I think it's a time for open and honest communication and candor above all else. In these uncharted waters, I think one of the biggest mistakes that leaders can make is pretending that they know more than they do, or make decisions, relying only on their instinct or on, previous experience. Through this crisis, I think leaders will undoubtedly have to rely on expertise that, they themselves don't have. And this could be one of those rare situations where, hierarchy matters less and mass opinion could actually dictate the next steps for the organization. And I think that this, could be an uncomfortable and different way of leadership for some. But one thing we know for sure is that COVID accelerated change, and we've had to pivot quickly. And one of the positives to the situation that has allowed for is that opportunity to think about things differently. And so, myself as a leader, I shared that our organization, we have heavily relied on the past, in recent years, very heavily on, in-person youth development programs and leadership programs. And guess what? There are no more in-person youth development programs. Our curriculum can't change on a dime. We cannot pivot quickly. We have a large fundraising event, being a nonprofit. I can't put 300 people, under a tent in October. And so really thinking through what does this look like, the only option that I can see, or the only way forward for this organization, is really to partner up. And as you say, Lubna, be local and think global. And so how do I, manage the mission of this organization, get my mission accomplished, work toward that vision, and really utilize the resources that are out there and the partners that we have in order to get that work done. And so we have spent the last 2 months, again, turning on a dime, really pivoting quickly and saying, there's a whole wide world out there and we need to embrace this change, as I said before. How are we going to embrace that in order to sustain the organization? And so we're taking a local organization and really turning it global. And so, used to be that leadership was, focused on speed and flexibility, but I think in this changing landscape, where there's really a global focus, we have digital necessity. There are, the social and political shifts are commonplace. We have to be agile and we have to be resilient and embrace opportunities that this forced change has given us.
Thank you so much. I saw all of us nodding as you were talking, and
Yeah.
for me, one of the main things that sort of resonated amongst many is this idea of leadership and humility. I think there are, a lot of leaders who want to look like they know what they're doing and not necessarily rely on a lot of input, and that's not going to fly anymore. It didn't really fly before, but I think going forward, people are really going to have to recognize that no one has the playbook and that we need to draw from lots of different resources outside our bubble. Any other?
I just want to add, if I may, one more thing. As I was thinking through and preparing for this question, the funny thing that came to mind is, leadership. When you think about leadership, basic leadership principles, and you think about things like humility or vulnerabilities, or and how you prepare for those things and how you navigate them, that's the essence of leadership. And so, leadership doesn't look different. Yes, we may have to, pivot on strategic plans and those sort of things, but in the core of who you are, when you talk about authenticity, and you talk about, having empathy, your employees are going through difficult times, your clients are going through difficult times. You just have to employ those really basic foundational skills of leadership. And I will tell you, seeing people as human beings is really what is going to get you through to the next place. And if you build that trust, it's all relational. You build the trust, and you're going to soar. It's the way I see it.
Does anyone else want to add to what Apryl was saying?
Lubna, it's exactly what I was just going to finish up with Apryl, when Apryl had said about, there's no playbook for this world. Well, Apryl just shared was there is. Be a good human being. Genuine. Do unto others as you would like to have done to you. These are timeless. Empathy, which she shared, obviously, everyone's like, what do I need to read? Go back to the basics. If you are seeking first Steve Covey, seek first to understand, to be understood. I mean, there are some timeless principles that people can use during this time that don't need to be created. And then the second thing I would say is, as businesses and companies look to do business, or anybody in general, at the end of the day, and I'll say frankly, is no one really cares what your problem is. At the end of the day, no one cares if you have a budget gap. No one cares if you're not selling whatever. But at the end of the day, if you, again, back to the empathy, if you care what the community needs, what that city needs, what a segment of the population need, by solving someone else's problem, the community's problem, in turn, you solve your problem.
Agreed. So, as we wrap up here, I wanted to ask each of you to share either just a summary of the high points that you feel are critical, or a takeaway, anything that you want to kind of highlight as we sort of wrap up here. Freddie, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, first of all, I think this was a great conversation with great individuals. So always enjoy sitting through these discussions. For me, I think, kind of going back to the notion that, COVID has allowed us an opportunity to hit reset. And how can we take advantage of that as much as possible? How can we, from a diversity and inclusion component, allow ourselves to start to implement those changes within the work that we're doing? We all have HR as part of the team. How can we allow HR to flow within this mindset of diversity and inclusion? We have, a CFO, we have a operation, how can we start to think about diversity and inclusion within those different positions, those areas, those departments, especially in a time now where we can do that. To end, I think there's a lot of individuals here in the Hudson Valley that mean well, want to help their employees, want to be helpful to their communities, and sometimes may not find, either the time or the person or the tool to do so. Today is a day for that to happen. And I think if, my hope is that, people who watch this roundtable and are challenged with those questions of how, who, I'm not sure, I think starting with pattern, as a resource and kind of going from there, I think is the first step to making sure that we get to the place that we need to get to. And again, that's not just in terms of diversity and inclusion, but everything we're dealing with in terms of COVID. I think you got to start somewhere. I know Jonathan, and Jonathan knows everyone. So if you don't know who to go to, I think Jonathan's the first person, and I'm sure he'll get you an answer. So I think that's my hope of this discussion. And again, I thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Freddie. Diego, would you like to share some last thoughts?
Sure, thank you, and thank you, Apryl and Freddie, for being with on this time. I've learned a lot from each of you, and the conversation has been really helpful. this morning. So thank you. It gave me a lot of food for the soul. So thank you. I'd like to leave just with a little parable that I just read from Dan Heath's book, which I think is very apropos. He was sharing about two individuals going near a river, and there's a baby. One sees a baby in the river coming down, and is like, "Oh my God, let's save the baby." Saves one. Next one comes down. Oh, there's another baby, and there's another one. And he's telling his friend, he's like, "Come on, Bob, let's go. I can't handle saving all these babies." And Bob starts running, dashing up. He's like, "Where are you going?" He's like, "I don't know. I'm going upstream to figure out whoever's throwing this baby and tackle that guy." And I think that's a really great story of the times. Do we need to save the babies? Yes. But we got to spend some time going upstream in whatever that way means to handle the systemic change, whether it's in our organization, whatever the case is, to tackle the big issues. People, say, obviously, depending on the lens that you look at, 2020 stinks. Some people say it's great. I choose to say that it, kind of like what Apryl and Freddy have been saying, that it's, it's not canceled. These are the labor pains of a great new birth. And don't let, as they say, a good crisis go to waste. So thank you, and wish everyone great blessings and continued blessings in the Hudson Valley.
Thank you so much, Diego. I love that. Apryl, how about you? Want to share any last thoughts as we wrap up?
No, I don't have much more to add. I think that Freddy and Diego really summed it up really nicely. And certainly my my thoughts and sharing this morning, it's an opportunity. And again, it's a mindset. It depends on the way you see the crisis. And so I do believe that there's a lot of opportunity. I want to thank, Diego and Freddy for allowing me to share space with you this morning, and also Lubna and Pattern. It's so nice to be reconnected with Pattern. But Diego left us with a parable, and so it's apropos for two reasons. And I was smiling while you read it. My board said to me the other day when we were having a real intense discussion, they said, "Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater." And so I've been thinking about that for some time, and we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we've got to think of it a different way. And the second thing I want to say is that earlier in the week, I was talking with a fellow colleague, and as it relates to, water and drowning and swimming, she said, I feel like I'm drowning in everything. I don't know what to do. And I just said to her, well, at least you know how to swim. And so when you're thinking about, those hard days and getting through and you feel like you're drowning, just remember, you rely on you and you know how to swim.
Thank you. Thank you, Apryl. Freddy, Apryl, Diego, I really appreciate you doing this panel, and I look forward to future collaborations. Given the breadth of experience on this panel, I appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts and your insights. Thank you so much to Pattern for Progress for providing these monthly webinars. The reality is we simply go further when we go together. And frankly, I'm excited to see how leadership and organizations are going to grow and collaborate in the months to come. Thank you so much.
Be part of the solution. Join. Become a member. Subscribe. Join our mailing list to stay in the know. Attend our events and virtual panel discussions. Sponsor. Become an event sponsor to support our programming. Participate. Get involved in a Pattern initiative like Fellows and LIFTHV. Invest. Support Pattern initiatives you're passionate about through an annual investment. Donate. Make a charitable contribution to support Pattern's work. Connect with us.